Шмель. Принял пост немедленно. Расчеты! Пост немедленно!
At 1:47 a.m. in eastern Ukraine, a launch crew sat in the dark inside a moving van, bumping along a forest track with the headlights off. On the screen in front of them, a single target icon, 1,000 kilometers away, Russia's Kryvyi oil refinery in the Leningrad region, a facility that handled roughly 6% of the country's refining capacity. In 3 hours, if everything worked, that number would be 0. At exactly 2 a.m., the lead operator armed packaged Kryvyi and executed the launch command. In the trees behind them, the first FPV-style long-range drone, callsign FP-1 Alpha, screamed down a short rail, wings flexing as it clawed into the cold night air at 80 kilometers per hour. 15 seconds later, another followed. Then another. Each banked northeast, climbing into a pre-programmed corridor that pointed straight into Russian airspace. The crew never watched their own launch. By the time the third drone was airborne, their van was already 2 kilometers away, running on night vision only, expecting Russian counter-battery fire to fall on the abandoned site within minutes. Across Ukraine, the same scene played out in fields, on highway rest stops, from factory rooftops, dozens of improvised launch points, all tied into a single strike plan. 361 drones rose into the night in a precisely timed sequence. The odd detail: the Kryvyi package, with the longest distance to fly, was launched last. Ukrainian planners had done the math. Drones headed for nearer targets. Moscow region, Bryansk, Smolensk, Ryazan, would cruise efficiently at around 150 kilometers per hour. The Kryvyi group would burn more fuel but push 200 kilometers per hour. Back-timed to the minute, all waves would arrive inside the same 20-minute window. Different regions, same problem for Russian air defense commanders. Too many threats, all at once. In temporarily occupied Donetsk, Russian early warning radars caught the launches within seconds. Systems capable of tracking a baseball at 60 kilometers suddenly watched dozens of small objects climbing in loose formation. The data flooded into Russia's integrated air defense network, feeding command centers all the way to Moscow. Pilots were scrambled. Missile batteries shifted from standby to ready. But the Russians had built this shield to stop billion-dollar assets: B-2 bombers, cruise missiles, manned aircraft. What was coming at them now was something their doctrine had never been economically designed to fight: swarms of cheap, adaptable, expendable drones. By 2:15 a.m., every strike element in the country was in motion. Over Belarus, 326 drones held course toward Moscow and secondary targets. 35 broke away, swinging north on a shallow arc. The Kryvyi package, alone now, heading into some of the most saturated airspace on the planet. At 2:45 a.m., just west of the Belarus-Russia border, the formation changed. The Ukrainians shifted from simple cruise to what their planners called a ladder. High overhead, modified Mugen 5 drones climbed to 3,000 meters and switched on noisy, easily detectable control links, even carrying corner reflectors to look fat and obvious on radar. Their mission was suicide by design: light up every long-range system in the sector. Mid-altitude, the UJ-22s held around 1,500 meters, some loaded with real warheads, others with ballast only. They were there to pull fire from tactical SAM systems, Buk, Tor, newer medium-range batteries, anything that could be dragged into expending missiles on cheap airframes. The real killers, the FP-1 strike drones, dropped to 50 meters, blades chewing through cold, dense air just above treetop level. Down here, radar beams scattered off buildings, terrain, and roadside clutter. Beyond roughly 30 kilometers, ground radars physically could not see them. Earth's curvature did the rest. Under that electronic horizon, the strike element effectively disappeared. Belarusian MiG-31s eventually got airborne, their powerful Zaslon M radars built to track B-52-sized targets at hundreds of kilometers. Against drone decoys at altitude, they performed as advertised: clean locks, clear tracks. But doctrine demanded visual confirmation before weapons release. By the time crews had eyes on and confirmed unmanned intruders, the genuine strike drones were already tens of kilometers ahead, still hugging the deck, still invisible. Just after 4 a.m., 200 kilometers short of Kirishi, the most dangerous part of the route loomed ahead. An S-300 battery with its 9S-19M2 phased array radar, nicknamed the Cheese Grater for its distinctive face and brutal effectiveness. The radar hopped across the X-band dozens of times a second, shifting frequencies too fast for traditional jamming to keep up. On paper, nothing short of a stealth bomber should have survived its search volume. Ukraine had learned otherwise from previous raids. The system carried a timing vulnerability. Every few seconds, it had to pause for a brief recalibration. For a fraction of a second, the beam went dark, a gap too small for manned jets to exploit, not too small for autonomous drones with code stripped down to a single purpose. One Mugen decoy climbed to 5,000 meters, intentionally stepping into the radar's kill zone. The S-300 responded with a missile costing millions of dollars to kill a drone worth a tiny fraction of that. In its final seconds before impact, the doomed decoy transmitted a precise timing pattern to the rest of the swarm, the heartbeat of the radar's blind spots. 27 seconds later, as the cheese grater array dropped into its recalibration gap, the FP-1S executed their programmed maneuver. Every drone pitched down to 10 meters altitude at once. For half a second, there were no returns. When the radar came back on, the drones were buried in ground clutter, their signatures blended with buildings, trees, and power lines. Tracks broke, solutions evaporated, engagement was denied. The S-300 had done its job exactly as designed, and still lost its targets. They had survived Russia's strategic shield. Ahead lay the electronic warfare belt. Here, the threat wasn't missiles, it was navigation itself. The electronic warfare belt came alive 120 kilometers from the target. On Russian scopes, GNSS constellations over the region simply vanished, jammed into useless noise. For any drone relying purely on satellite navigation, this was a kill zone without a single missile fired. But the Kirishi package had not been built around satellites. Each FP-1 carried a hardened inertial unit, a basic terrain contour map, and a cheap but effective star tracker slaved to a downward-facing optical camera. At pre-planned points, the drones ignored the sky entirely and flew by the ground. Rivers, forest lines, highway interchanges, power lines, all converted into digital waypoints by Ukrainian analysts weeks before the launch. 70 kilometers out, final guidance took over. Each drone compared live video with stored imagery of the Kirishi complex, cracking units, storage tanks, control buildings. Once the correlation hit threshold, the flight computer stopped thinking about geography and locked onto geometry. Angles, shadows, light patterns. At 5:21 a.m., the first FP-1 came in at rooftop height, engines screaming over the tree line, then dropped directly into a battery of high-pressure pipelines. A split second later, the feed cut to static. Others followed, into distillation columns, pumping stations, loaded storage tanks. Security cameras caught a brief, jerking silhouette of a low-flying drone, and then a white flash that turned night into hard daylight. Within minutes, a column of fire rose hundreds of meters into the sky. Russian regional channels spoke of a localized incident. Independent satellites later showed multiple burned-out sections and weeks of halted throughput. By dawn, the surviving Ukrainian crews were already packing for the next operation. They had proven a simple, brutal equation. A state-built strategic refinery worth billions could be crippled by a swarm of improvised airframes and civilian electronics. No gunfire, no dogfights, no declared air campaign, just a quiet recalculation and every headquarters watching. In this war, and in the wars to come, the side that adapts faster in the drone domain doesn't just strike first. It decides which parts of the enemy's map simply stop existing.